Hello, hello. Welcome everybody back to this episode of Awaken with Lauren Wild. We are going to be talking a lot about the astrology for the last week of August of 2024 into the first week of September as we move into the new moon in Virgo. And we're also going to start talking a little bit about this upcoming lunar eclipse at 25 degrees of Pisces in September of 2024. So just to let you know, I'm starting to kind of get a little bit of a hang of how I want to be doing content as I'm expanding this podcast. This is one of my bigger new goals that I'm developing this fall. As I've shared, super transparent about my entrepreneurial process. I've been working on a podcast for 4 years. I launched it originally in 2020 during pandemic world and played around a lot. I actually had a co-podcast with my dear friend Stephanie Green. For those of you that love Stephanie Green, we had a podcast in 2019 called The Wild Rising. And then I also had a shared podcast briefly with Kevin Garcia. But then we had COVID and it was like impossible to keep up with our podcast during the early stages of COVID. As a matter of fact, Kevin was literally at my house, like when things were getting shut down. So crazy to reflect back on that because it feels like it was yesterday, as well as like 20 years ago, which is the power of time and relativity, right? So without getting too much into the weeds of it all, let's go ahead and get into our content for this podcast. So we are talking mainly about some of the astrology, trying to translate that into layman terms. I have a life mantra, and that is, don't tell me shitty news if you're not going to tell me what to do about it. I think this is going to become a bigger and bigger issue as we start to see the nodal axis move into those very late degrees of Libra and start to get closer and closer to the Pisces Virgo axis, because that is very much about the dissolve and structure component of the zodiac, which would be Pisces around dissolving quality and surrender, and then Virgo, which is to hyperfixate, analyze, and structure, right? It's the organizational part of the zodiac. And so I think we're going to be definitely playing a lot with those themes. A lot of people don't know that the original name of my LLC and original business name was The Mystic and the Mundane. And so technically my business is actually a Sagittarius sun and has a Gemini rising. And so it's like a version of myself as Sagittarius rising, but I digress. So let's get into it. So today is Monday, the 26th of August of 2024. And like I said, I'm trying to find a rhythm, and I'm feeling Moon Day, Monday. Monday is ruled by the moon, to be powerful in around like weekly forecasts. Some are going to be a little longer when we've got big aspects coming up, like a new moon or a full moon. But if you do me a favor and look back, you will see where it says buckle up buttercup, the previous episode before this. I go into a lot more detail at as the end of August, like mid to end of August, if you want more details. So today, a lot of what we're going to be focusing on is the last quarter moon that happened around 5:30 a.m. this morning, Eastern Standard Time, up to the new moon in Virgo. Like I said, I go over it in detail, but we want to start to pay attention to any lunation that has to do with Virgo or Pisces, actually any of the mutable signs, which would also be Gemini and Sagittarius, because these are the 4 signs that are really gearing up to start to see some pretty massive change. And so even though the nodal axis doesn't change until 2025, when the North Node moves from Aries into Pisces and the South Node moves from Libra into Virgo, we have some really interesting shifts that begin to happen, because the Aries Libra axis is very much Aries being the first zodiac sign that is about me, the identity, the individual, is ruled by Mars, and then the we, which is Libra, 7th house, committed relationships, best friends, business partners, even open enemies. A lot of people don't know that about the seventh house, but it is very, very close partnerships. Okay. So I like to call this the me and we axis. When we start to get into the Virgo Pisces axis, we are talking a lot about what I like to call the healer part of the axis. So they are both healers, Virgo as well as Pisces. I mean, all the signs have access to healing in different ways, as could be said about all wow, Mercury is definitely about to station retrograde. I apologize for that. Everyone has a multi-dimensional self. We just have to unlock it, validate it, work with it. A very powerful practice to work with that is called IFS part systems. And I think I talk about that a lot. It's one of the two sessions before. It might be Evolve or Resolve. I can't remember. Just go back and listen if you haven't already. It's good stuff. But there is this aspect of how Virgo is very structured. It literally rules the chiropractic arts, health, nutrition, supplements, health coaching of any kind, actually. It's very organizational, chiropractic arts, because the modern ruler of Virgo is Chiron, the wounded healer. And then Pisces is like singing bowls and ayahuasca and trance states and mysticism, and seership. It's very different. It's Reiki, and so they're different in the way that they are polarized, but when they meet in the middle for integration, they can be very, very supportive in that way, which is that mystic and mundane aspect. So let's go ahead and talk about the last quarter moon that happened this morning. It definitely brings with it a sense of some sort of completion. It was at 3 degrees of Gemini this morning. It was in a square to the sun. So the sun in that square to the moon is like some sort of challenge around your emotions. And with the moon in Gemini, it's a lot about our mind. It's about what feels close to us, our communication. You would want to look at where 3 degrees of Gemini is for you in your chart. That would tell you some things. But then the sun at 3 degrees of Virgo, that first decan of Virgo, is very much about, what is practical, what makes sense, what things in your life are starting to get illuminated that needs more healing, more organization, more structure. So those are just some things that you want to think about. There's definitely that bigger push that is happening with Gemini right now because Mars is in Gemini. It's at 23 or 24 degrees of Gemini today. So it has a lot of intensity behind the mind right now. And it's really kind of like pushing us to say the thing, to, take the thought and put it to action, and to write the email, to communicate the thing, to build the website, anything that has to do with the mind, the thought, communications, perception, is ruled by Gemini. And so it's important to understand that communication, we start the week off with communication being very important, and there possibly being some kind of nostalgia or challenge or a potentiality for conflict, because Gemini can definitely it can like overthink. It can be kind of paranoid in some ways, because it can cast out a lot of different ideas about scenarios, how things could go. And Virgo is like, we need the data, we need to have the conversation. And that's where that challenge comes in, right? Because Gemini likes to be curious. It doesn't really want to know. At the end of the day, Gemini wants to stay curious. And Virgo wants the data. It says, run the experiment. What did the percentage of the control say? What was the peer-reviewed, data that we're looking for? It is curious in the beginning, but it wants the data. It wants to know how, the statistics were after you ran it 10 times, right? What was the outcome of the experiment? That's very much Virgo, right? Now, if you look at Sagittarius, it's like, what is data? Life is just experience, and if you look at Pisces is Well, probably like meditating and like, I believe in infinite outcomes and I trust that the universe will land it right in my lap. I don't need data, right? The universe will direct me. So those like kind of some of the different ways that those mutable signs would deal with, trying to make a decision in a lot of ways. So what we start this week off in is a bit of a mind crunch. Followed by this need to take action, probably from some sort of communication. That communication could have triggered someone, it could have brought something up within yourself, et cetera, et cetera. But what these mutable aspects are showing us, because we've got, this last quarter moon in Gemini, the new moon coming up in Virgo, then we get our full moon, which is our lunar eclipse in the first aspect of Pisces. All right. And that's really where I'm trying to go, because we are probably, I don't know about you guys, but my antenna is picking up so much about this lunar eclipse coming up in Pisces. I'm having a lot of dreams about water. I'm having a lot of dreams about, dreams, really. I'm having dreams within dreams. But a lot of that subconscious energy is starting to rise up. And my guides and my channel are really like, hey, it's time to start talking about surrender. It's time to start talking about Pisces and nostalgia and what's coming in, so that people don't feel like, a 30-foot tidal wave or surge of emotion is just going to come in, and grab their life and drag it out to sea. And then they're like, where did my life go? And as a person whose house was destroyed by 2 separate hurricanes as a child, and I have it's going to be exactly conjunct my nadir, which is the very bottom, the roots of my chart. I totally understand what it's like to have something sturdy and standing, and then overnight, literally, a 25-foot tidal surge come in and rip your home away into the sea. Like, a lot of people don't know that, but I grew up in Florida. We lived on the water. I'm very, very blessed. I spent almost my entire childhood in the water. I was a lifeguard for 7 years. I could have gone to the Junior Olympics for swimming. That was my sport. But the biggest thing is understanding that what happens with Pisces is it's much like trying to build a sandcastle, where you build this beautiful sandcastle out of sand, and slowly but surely the tide starts to shift and change, and the water will begin to lap onto the foundation of your sandcastle, and all of a sudden it will just collapse and be dissolved out to the sea, and the water will come in and it will just kind of pull more of it out and pull more of it out. And that's what we are really setting ourselves up for here for the next 2 years, is this deep place of surrender and realignment to spirit. And I think that it is going to be very important for, especially Saturn and Pisces. It's going to really start to demand that we begin to restructure our lives post-COVID. Pisces also rules sickness. The full moon in Virgo in 2020 was when we had the COVID pandemic begin. So I know there's got to be something going on, not necessarily with a new pandemic, but I'm not willing to make any predictions on that right now. But the restructure, Virgo, of our health, of our spirituality, of how we are functioning on a health level in a society, as well as the restructuring of our faith after such a huge hit. Not to be too US centric, I know like most of my listeners are from the US. I'm totally open to all listeners, all nationalities, all location. But I am here in the States, and there's some crazy stuff going on here as we're in election year. But I think that there is an organizational health shift that's probably going to start to have to get reinstated or shifted somehow. But even more so than that, what I'm really interested in as a spiritual teacher is how we are going to be led to restructure our faith after, in a lot of ways, we've lost our faith in, the United States American dream. We've lost a lot of our faith in our religious structures, in the concept of marriage, in the concept, a 9-to-5 work job, in a workplace. We've lost a lot of our faith in the idea that you go to college and you get a good job and you buy a house and you get married and you raise 2 kids with a white picket fence and a dog. All of that American dream stuff is really washing away out to sea. And there's a new structure that I think is going to begin to be put in place. And so I think that we are really getting into that energy of that evolve or dissolve, because at the end of the day, in order to be able to get through Pisces lunar eclipses is going to require a very specific thing, and that is faith. And so Pisces says, I believe. And I can tell you right now, especially after being tested in my own resolve and resilience this past summer with being extremely sick, and having extreme levels of stress, relational stress thrust upon me, despite my greatest efforts to resolve it with peace. I will say that it really and truly was 2 things. And that is, it was support from my loved ones, and it was faith that something bigger than me was carrying me through this for a purpose. Some people might think that that is silly, but there is actually a ton of research on how faith and hope are actually evolutionary parts of us that we have been woven into the human story, the human narrative, to have hope, to have myth, and to have faith when we're going through extremely difficult times that we feel like we have no control over. It's actually a form of evolution. It's part of how the human species evolved and it grew. And so having the ability to have hope and faith in difficult times is an evolutionary factor. It means that you're resilient. It means that you are smart, and it means that you have a higher chance of surviving extreme challenge. And so with this, eclipse period that's coming in, that's going to carry us almost all the way into election day here in the United States, like, there is an aspect of needing structure, needing routine, needing to go to bed early, needing to take care of our physical body and our everyday mundane responsibilities, Virgo 6th house energy, and then needing to believe in something bigger than us, even if it means we have to escape the concept of reality. Very Piscean. It is a form of evolution to know and believe that we are all a part of consciousness. We are all a part of each other, of the God fractal reality of consciousness. We're all one, as well as infinitely unique individual beings and fractals of the great God goddess mystery, right? As above, so below. So why I share all of that is because if you have felt nostalgic, if you have felt like you're kind of looking back, in a lot of ways, that is a combination of Mercury retrograde, because Mercury is going to station direct this week. It's also Uranus getting ready to station this weekend. And then we are gearing up for full-on, nonstop eclipse energy that is coming right down the pipe. And that lunar eclipse in Pisces, I am trying to be super prepared for it, because I know it's going to be emotional. The full moon in Pisces, it happens in September every year. It messes me up every year because you're just like so emotional. But it requires us to surrender. It requires us to allow certain parts of our lives to dissolve. And that's any full moon in Pisces, happens in September every year. But you add in a lunar eclipse, which is a karmic release. That means that Ketu, the tail of the dragon, the tail of the serpent in the lunar nodes, the south node, is getting activated, and it's beginning to purge and release a story that's 20 years old. Okay, 20 years old. So you want to think about, what was going on 18 years ago. Because whatever was going on 18 years ago is what you're really starting to feel bubble up from the subconscious, more so than any other sign. Because Pisces rules the super subconscious. It means you don't know it's there. It's in your dreams, it's in your cells, it's in the archetypes of your blood, it's in your wells of ancestral blood. So, like, you don't even know it's there. It's in your super subconscious. The only way it can be activated is through symbol, through color, through smell, through emotion, right? It's the super subconscious. It's working with what is way, way, way underneath. So I think you're really going to start to see a big burst of growth in the world of hypnotism, NLP, manifestation, really, really deep levels of transpersonal psychology, EMDR. All of that is subconscious rewiring and reprogramming, which I'm thrilled to know about, because at the end of the day, most of what I work with is transpersonal and subconscious based therapeutics. And it all requires us to have to do shadow work to look at, well, what's under that, and then to surrender to it, to move into radical acceptance and very Eastern mindset Buddhist principles around it without trying to escape it, which reminds me of this teaching that Ram Dass taught that blew my mind years ago. And I come back to it often as a Sagittarius rising with Uranus right on my ascendant, is that I came here to experience freedom. And so much of my life, I thought that freedom was bucking against a system or someone or something. And it wasn't until I listened to this, and I have to be reminded of it quite often, that what Ram Dass taught is, freedom is not pushing something to you, right? Like pulling, and freedom is not pushing something away from you. Freedom is being right here and right now. That is actually true freedom, is to exist without trying to pull or push an experience away from us, but to be here in the present moment. And as a person that is very committed to living an embodied life that is very human in nature, that's hard. That's hard. And so I think we're really going to start to come back to our sense of faith and our restructuring of faith in a way that is supportive to us after such a huge awakening of the collective, and really and truly just the whole earth experiencing a 4D Kundalini activation and awakening. And I think we're going to get another ticking up of that as we get into 2025, when Uranus finally moves out of Taurus and it begins to move into Gemini. And that is when we're going to start to see the elevation of the mind. We're going to start to really, really, really see, like, so, I mean, I don't even want to get into it right now, but so many technological advancements, specifically through the mind. And that's another podcast, which we'll do, because it really excites me. But for now, let me go ahead and just share a couple of other things that I think that are really important this week as we are looking at, I've got my notes, I don't want to forget. Remember, we had that last quarter moon. So last quarter moon weeks are powerful, because what it means is that the moon, it hit its peak illumination period at the full moon. It does every single lunation, which is 28 to 29 and a half days. So we had that big full moon Aquarius last week. And then the moment we hit the exaction is the moment that it starts to lose its intensity, and it starts to kind of like let the balloon, like if you're trying to blow up a balloon, it starts to let the balloon start to go down. All right. And so we've been waning down, starting to feel that pulling inward energy. And once we hit the third quarter moon exaction is when we start to feel that sense of release. Like there is some sort of challenge, because it was in Gemini, you would want to look back at the new moon in Gemini, which was in May. What was something you committed to in May, that you recognize that needs to start being released so that you can move towards what it looks like to manifest it. And so you really want to think about, what is coming up for you around your mind, mindsets, communications, friends, networking, ideas. Is there anything that has shifted that you started to go all in on, during that new moon in Gemini, that you're starting to see some answers or some completion around that you want to consider? And then tomorrow on Tuesday, we've got Venus trine Uranus, and it's going to be there until like the end of the week. So Venus trine Uranus is, it's beautiful because Venus is in Virgo. She can be quite obsessive, perfectionistic. I only know because I have Venus in Virgo. But she also is a person of service. She shows love through showing up. And that's really important to Venus in Virgo. And when you add in a trine to Uranus in Taurus, which are the earth signs, you might see some things really start to try to form a strong foundation for. And there could be an aspect of it being around particularly the feminine force because of the Venus aspect. But this is about freedom. This is about something to get excited about. It's something new, something exciting. Uranus, like kind of electrifies our life. Whenever Venus is involved, we're also talking about finances and we're talking about romance. So you may have like a powerful, if you're single, dating experience. If you're partnered, you might find something that's new or erotic, dare I say even kinky, like there's a shift to it. There's some sort of spice that's happening. You may also see some new income come in, a new influx of a way to make a new income, those earth energies. You may also get back into some sort of fitness routine, especially as we're moving towards that new moon in Virgo, which tends to be a commitment back to health, right, and organization. On Wednesday, the moon's going to move into Cancer, so we could definitely feel the feelings starting to creep in, some nostalgia. There could also be some aspects around real estate or home with that going on. Whenever we see eclipses, it's also a time that babies are born, people leave this world. With Virgo, it's also about animals. So just to let you know, not to scare anyone, but Virgo is associated with small animals. So make sure you're really taking care of their health at this time, especially with an eclipse coming up in Pisces. It's important to be careful because Pisces is the 12th house, which is end of life energy. And so it's a heavy eclipse. Okay, guys, I'm just trying to slowly but surely prepare you for the way that this eclipse is going to affect us is going to be absolutely in the feels. Not super looking forward to it personally. So, it's also a time for deep surrender and healing and purge, and for new faith that begins to develop through surrender. It's a very receptive energy. It is the yin, it's the feminine of feminine. And so, and I'm going to talk about this in length because at the end of this podcast, I'm going to be sharing about some free classes and workshops I've got coming up. And one of them is on the Pisces eclipse. So make sure you hang tight to the end of this so you can figure out how to get registered for it. But I want to talk also about Venus being opposite Neptune on Wednesday. So remember how we talked about Uranus? Uranus is exciting. It's different. It's change. Neptune is about some sort of like release, surrender, dissolving quality that starts to pick up. And it's in those late degrees because we're looking at 29 degrees, 28 degrees. So there's some like latent energy that needs to get dealt with. It's heavy, it's emotional. Again, it can kind of like lead to feelings of wanting to escape, wanting to fantasize and not be a part of reality about it. It can be something that has to do with disappointment or something you have to let go of or surrender, but it can have an aspect of confusion or deception tied to it. There's something around that. Okay. So just want to let you guys know. And then later around 5 on Wednesday is when Mercury is going to station direct at 21 degrees of Leo. So we will see that completion. And then we've got 2 weeks of the Mercury retro shade where Mercury is going to go back over all the degrees until it gets back to 8 degrees of Virgo. And then we'll be in the clear. And that's about the middle of September. which is like right before we get into eclipse season. So we'll have a very short period of time where we'll gain a lot of clarity. And then we'll get a cazimi shortly after that, which again is another burst of clarity. And we'll get to that when we get to that. On Thursday, Venus is going to move into Libra at 9:22 a.m. in the morning as a Libra. I'm very excited about this. And then like right after that, Venus is going to trine Pluto. So Venus will hit that 29 degrees, and it's going to trine Pluto. And or sorry, no, it'll be at 1 degrees because Pluto hasn't dropped into 29 degrees yet. That's later. That's around October. So it'll be at 1 degrees, and there's an intensity there, especially if you were someone that was born in like the early like the mid 1970s, because that's like the generation that had Pluto in Libra. Man, that could be really intense. So like buckle up if you've got any aspects that are in early Libra, particularly around 1 to 4 degrees of Libra, you could really feel that intensity, just letting you know. And I keep saying intensity because Pluto does rule intensity. It also rules obsessions. It rules depth and secrets. Like anything that you have been really burying might like come up to the surface to want to be like discussed, processed, fears, imbalances, things like that may want to get brought up that could lead to potentially harmony in relationships. So on Friday, we will have the moon enter Leo, and that will be interesting because then, over the weekend, we'll have the moon in Leo where it's going to go over those retrograded aspects of Mercury. And we could really feel a lot start to come up to the surface because also we're going to have Mars semi-sextile Uranus. Pluto retrograde is going to enter Capricorn for a very short, brief moment before it stations direct. And it literally will not go back into Capricorn again for 249 years. So it's very important to understand that, it's going to be there as we have our elections this fall. It's very intense, very, very intense. And then Uranus is going to station retrograde, and we are going to feel this deep sense of change and shift and growth. And like, I think that all of the retrogrades are super powerful, but every year and every reading I do with people, I have found that Uranus retrograde is probably one of the most like poignant and significant shifts that happens in people's entire year, next to the eclipses. Like it is wild how often I see that the Venus retrogrades, the Mars retrogrades, Uranus retrograde, and eclipses, like those are the ones that almost always stick out more than any Mercury retrograde, right? Like it doesn't mean that you can't have one that isn't like a Mercury retrograde that isn't pronounced and big, especially if it like goes over your natal planets. But I have found Uranus to really be quite a shocking and destabilizing energy. And so what I want to say about that is just kind of buckle up, like be prepared for things to start to shift. You really want to look at that 27 to 28 degree orb of Taurus in your chart, because that's going to show you where things are about to start to shift and change in your life. So I hope that all of that is helpful. When we meet next week, we're going to be talking about that new moon in Virgo, as well as September astrology, and really starting to gear up for this full moon in Pisces, which is also a lunar eclipse that is going to kick off the 2-year journey of eclipses in the Pisces and Virgo axis. So if you are interested in learning about these things for free, then my suggestion to you is that you make sure you check out the notes where you can see where you can get registered for my newsletter, and that way you can register and come to these events. I've got a series of 3 of them. The first one's Mercury retrograde, the second one is the eclipse in Pisces, and the third one is the eclipse in Libra. And a lot of this is to be able to show you and to educate you guys on how group coaching works. I've had a lot of people asking me, like, how do you help people in a group coaching dynamic? And I'm going to show you. It's very effective. I've done it with literally hundreds of students and have great reviews. And so we're going to offer that, as well as some really excellent ways to create some great content for the fall, so that we're kind of doing two birds, one stone situation. And so without getting too much into the details of why, let me just invite you in. So if you've been listening and this has been helpful to you, it would mean so, so, so much to me if you would do me a favor, if you would like, subscribe, share, and give me a 5-star review. It would mean so much to me. I do so much prep and work to make sure that I'm bringing this information to you guys. And it would mean so much to me if you share my work. It truly, I'm trying to really get organized, and that is Mercury retrograde in my 9th house, and get really consistent about delivering service and support to the collective as we go through this mass consciousness awakening on the planet. But also, as a single mom and entrepreneur with 3 kids, it means the world to me when you guys help me out. It means I can stay in business. It means I don't have to go corporate. It means that I get to continue to stay in my work. And it means so, so, so much to me, especially after being sick this summer. I just have this new profound gratitude for all of my students, all of my clients, all of my friends, my family, my kids, for the support, because I absolutely love this work. But we do live, unfortunately, in late stage capitalism, and unfortunately, Mama still has to pay her bills. So do me a favor, please like, subscribe, give me 5 stars, leave a comment, share. Make sure you're following me on Instagram, because I'm about to really start to prioritize, especially in the stories, trying to get feedback. We're about to start having guests. I've been really gaining my skills since I've been on bed rest all summer. And I'm really, really, really excited to continue to share all of this with you guys. So without further ado, I will say goodbye for now, and I'll see you guys on our next episode. Thanks so much. All right, bye.